Today, my topic has a universal value as it relates not only to marketing or business, but to personal development, which is in high demand as we're going through the year of transition, which encourages us to act sharp, brave, and look at the bigger picture of the future. We are required to be resilient, be it business or personal life, to stay focused and productive while everything else is changing. And my guest in this episode is an expert in this area, as she teaches resilience. Meet Yulia, a learning and development manager from a global consulting firm by profession and the job that she does, and a business and resilience coach with a degree in applied psychology by the interest and a life choice. Let's go. Is it something that we can say positioning you, Yulia? Because I know you for some time and you've been always a very successful career-wise in a corporate environment. You've been always doing a great career steps. What brought you to coaching? What brought you to the topic of resilience? And I would like to hear your story.
Yes, it positions me quite well. Although I refer to myself as a development professional, I really passionate about supporting people in organization in their development. And my interest in change and resilience and development was triggered a lot of years ago when I just started my career in human resources area. It was in 2004 when I worked as an executive search consultant in an agency. And during my time in the agency, I interviewed around 1,000 people. I think I counted the number. I decided to count the number of interviews at some stage because I was really curious about how many stories, career stories I heard. So, and of course, every story was very unique, right, about every person. But what I started to notice at some time, that there is a pattern in success stories and in less successful stories, let's say. So when I started to reflect on why these people who were not successful, who were probably not hired, not promoted, or struggling in their organizations, why was that? Because a lot of these people, they were professional, they were skillful, and they wanted to grow. They were really upset about their bad luck. So when I started to, and of course I kept talking with people, kept asking the question, keep observing what's going on in their careers. And I realized that there are actually probably one big reason that can summarize that was underlying pattern for all these stories. Those people who were not successful, they were actually struggle with the change that they were supposed to make. Right. Sometimes this change was about for example, having changes in top management teams. Sometimes the change was going through merger and acquisitions and need to adjust a new culture. Or sometimes it was a change, and they need to apply new kind of tools, frameworks in their job. And people who resisted this change, they struggled. They were not considered as having high potential or willing or whatever. And basically it kept them stuck. So I started to asking myself this question, what can be done to support people to go through this change? And it set me on a very long path. I moved to learning and development area in 2007, and then I started to become interested in coaching. So that was triggered my interest in resilience and change topic. And of course, 2020, it was the big year when I realized that actually, if not for our resilience, we wouldn't be surviving this year. So
that's a great story. I love this story. So resilience. How does resilience relate to change? Let's just talk a little bit more about that, since you've been studying this topic. What is resilience? What are the components that it contains?
Resilience is a big topic in psychology, and there is a lot of research in this area. And despite this many research articles, there are still no single definition of resilience, and there are multiple frameworks. The framework that I'm using has been developed by PSI company. It's one of the key talent solutions provider with whom I work. So their definition of resilience is our capacity to adapt positively to challenge, change, and setbacks in order to achieve high performance. And I want to emphasize that this definition has two parts. First, it's our capacity to adapt in order to achieve high performance, right? So it's something that we can do, certain strategies that we can apply in order for us to be successful, basically. And it comprises of 8 strategies, which I will name them. We can elaborate on them later. So these strategies are self-belief, optimism, purposeful direction, ingenuity, adaptability, challenge orientation, support seeking, and emotion regulation. And what's important about this concept of resilience is that it's not a fixed trait, that it's not some kind of internal strength that we were born with. It's something that we can develop throughout all our life. And if you feel that, you're not quite resilient person in some areas today, that's totally fine. You can do better tomorrow.
Right. And when I'm listening to you, I'm actually, so although we're focusing a lot on the personal kind of level when it comes to resilience, but I think it also relates pretty much to businesses and the way brands are adapting to new environments and change, the way brands are fast to react to what's happening in the market, for example, or to what's happening to their audience. And I think it is totally useful for the brands to also start studying resilience and apply some of the strategies in business as well. So that's why I think this conversation is absolutely valuable. So to me, what I've heard is, so it's how fast me as a business or me as a person can absorb the change, how positive I am about this change. Do I see it as a problem or do I see it as an opportunity? Brilliant. Mm-hmm. I like it. And so I want to ask you something. Like, why are we talking about resilience so much now? Obviously, it relates a lot to 2020 and the pandemic that happened last year. And that triggered a lot of things. But what really happened to people? What really happened to businesses from a psychology perspective? So why has it become such a milestone in many levels of our lives?
The main thing that happened to all of us, the world that we knew stopped to exist. So all our structures, a lot of our structures, they were destroyed or changed, significantly changed. A lot of our routines were changed. Think about our working environment. Suddenly, instead of waking up every day, bringing our kids to work, to school, and then going to work, coming back in the evening, suddenly we're all stuck at home. And if you remember the initial days of pandemic, we were in a lockdowns. It's something completely unnatural, right? For us to be stuck at homes. We are social beings.
That's one of the challenges that is often mentioned by different analysts' reports is lack of in-person interaction. So I want to ask you, why lack of in-person interaction is such a trigger for many people and for many businesses as well?
We are social human beings, right? And our brains are wired in that way. We need social support. We need social interaction, right? We need it because social interaction, basically, it acts as a buffer against stress, right? When we are interacting with others, it's a chance for us to share our feelings, to get the support, sometimes to find solutions. Actually, support seeking and relying on others, it's one of the important strategies for resilience. And suddenly we were cut off this important resource. And for some people, depending on their personality, it was a bigger challenge than for others. For example, I know a lot of people who are more introverted and who are enjoying being on their own. Until some stage they were enjoying that, and then they started to struggle because it was very difficult for them to actually put additional efforts into building a relationship. It required of them additional efforts. And of course, it drains off a lot of energy.
Absolutely. I like this example because we never think about it seriously. But for example, when you're working in an office environment, or when you are meeting people during an event, and some contacts are happening naturally. So this natural conversation is so, we never thought how lucky we were just to have this opportunity to interact with other people. And then when you're stuck at home and your calendar is actually structured by the Zoom meetings, for example, so every time you want to have that simple chat or to build that social connection, so you actually need to make an effort and to do a telephone call. And this telephone call, for example, can lead to different results, right? It could be a rejection, right? People might not pick up. They might be busy and not speak to you. And so your efforts are kind of not paid back, right? And it probably for some people, and I might say at some point me, so I myself probably that person. So I would probably be disappointed for some time. So I will spend my internal resource to absorb this feeling, right? And then I need to make another effort to call again.
Of course. It's one of the examples and one of the reasons why it was so difficult for us. Another reason why it was so difficult for us, because we are not aware of how many cues about we are getting from interacting with people personally, right? When, for example, a lot of people throughout this year, when they were moving jobs, they were starting to work virtually, right? And they never got a chance to meet their colleagues in person until now, maybe. I'm, by the way, one of them. So, and why it can trigger anxiety? Because when we are in the office, talking to other people and hearing their voice, it's just one of the ways we are getting information about other persons. We are also unconsciously, we're getting information, cues from person's gestures, from the way the person looks at us, from the way he moves, from the way we're also getting signals from the external environment, just observing how people interact in the offices, who talks with who goes to lunch with whom, what happens when people come to the office, when they leave, what's acceptable, what's not. So a lot of things we are picking up unconsciously. And suddenly, the only way for us to understand another person, to understand our environment, we have to rely on people's voice. Because a lot of people, they don't want even to keep their cameras on during the call. And that's why it takes a lot of efforts from our side, cognitive efforts, right?
Yeah, and that brings us to another sort of most popular operational challenge that was mentioned in many reports is the sort of Zoom or virtual meeting fatigue. Sort of. So now I wanted to understand what does it mean, and it's great to have you as an expert also in probably with some psychology knowledge as well to understand where is it coming from? Why are we so tired of Zoom meeting? Why are we not getting the same energy when we speak over virtual, for example, meeting? So if you could name sort of or structure it a little bit more here, that would be great.
Yeah, and it's a very, very popular topic of research at the moment because a lot of people are complaining about Zoom fatigue or virtual meetings fatigue. So one of the recent research that I read on that topic was explaining actually the reasons why this is happening, why we are so tired of these Zoom meetings, why it's so burdening for us. And interesting what they found. They found that when we are having video conference, first, there is a special name for that. So it's like a mirror effect. It's a lot of times when we are keeping our cameras on, we are looking at ourselves as we would be looking at ourselves in the mirror, right? And of course, it's distracting. And for a lot of people, it keeps us self-conscious all the time. And, being a female, how you feel when you're looking at the mirror, right? So sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're not so happy. So, and when you have to keep constantly looking at the mirror, so of course it creates stress. A lot of that might be actually explaining why some people prefer to keep their cameras off. And actually, it's even advised from this, on the basis of this research, it's actually advised to keep your camera off and to keep it on only when you need it, just, to help yourself.
Right.
Also, another reason of this Zoom fatigue is actually because when we are looking at other person, and when the person and the distance between us and laptop and the face of other person is very, very small, right? So, and and psychologically, we would be allowing only people who are very close to us in this intimate zone. And when we are allowing strangers, our brain automatically sends the signal that something is wrong, that it's a threat. And also when we are looking at the other person's face and it appears quite large on the screen, it's not also something, and we can see big eyes, and also our brain interprets it as a threat. That's why it takes a lot of resources from us to manage this anxiety. Even unconsciously. That's why we became so tired.
I think it's also a great information and a great knowledge to have when we're saying from marketing perspective, for example, to the amount of online events that are happening. Things like webinars, things like virtual events that are coming on top of our regular jobs, of our regular schedules. And it's great knowledge to take into consideration when thinking about how can we act next to care about the audience, at the same time to continue with our marketing activities, etc. So which brings me also to another example that I wanted to give here. So I've recently watched a very interesting interview with a TikTok blogger. She's 21 and she's got something like 20 million followers on TikTok. And I've realized that Generation Z, let's put it, probably Generation Z or whatever, so a lot of people who were born in the era of digital feel absolutely natural in the digital environment. On the contrary. So they communicate in that environment and they discover themselves in that environment through what they create, through how they express themselves digitally. Like look at TikTok and the way some people are expressing themselves. And this is the way how they find each other in terms of the interests, in terms of how they attract each other. And I think that's a good point towards the fact that why are we moving towards hybrid world, which is going to be digital as well as in person, because our society is diverse. There are people who are willing to come back to a face-to-face interaction, and there are people who were born and actually grew their business as for example, somebody who's present on TikTok, right? And they feel absolutely natural to be a digital person, right? They probably don't want any physical interaction as such. So I think, the hybrid environment is something that can be explained by this particular trend, I guess.
Of course. And it's not only young people who they are feeling comfortable in this environment because they were born with a gadget in their hands, how they say, right? But also people, I think, after last year, when a lot of people and a lot of companies were forced actually to introduce remote working. Now what we are seeing is the trend that even going back to normal and being able to actually have people back in their offices, still a lot of companies are moving forward with a hybrid model because it proved that certain benefits to the business, right? And it's from many angles. So it's here to stay, and I think probably the next step for corporations will be to explore how it can be implemented to the advantage of the business and people even more.
Absolutely. So I would actually start now jump into the topic, since the change is the new normal. The change is here to stay. So we're going to learn how to live with a constant transformation. So, and I know resilience is not one skill, and we're not born with resilience. So it's a set of skills that can be developed. So maybe we could look at the strategies that you mentioned in the beginning and see how we can practically apply them in personal life. And I will probably, try and apply them to your business environment as well. So what are those, let's say, skills that can help us start building resilience?
Resilience, I would say, it's less about skills, it's more about mindsets, right? And answering the question, what can help us? Where should one start when thinking about resilience? It's an individual journey, of course, right? So a lot of psychologists believe that the foundation of resilience is self-belief. It's the way it's about our mindset, how we view ourselves. Do we believe that we can cope with anything? Do we have this can-do approach? Or do we shy away from change and challenge? Do we try to hide ourselves? Do we not believe in our ability to cope? So I would suggest starting with this one. Ask you, when you are experiencing change and going through a challenging moment in your life, help yourself to believe that you can do it, right?
And here I've got a question, it's a comment more than a question. So it's easier said than done, right? So changing, I often read this piece of advice that change your mindset from negative to positive. But I also know like a person who's very sort of self-aware, etc. It's quite difficult. Everybody has to work out their own mechanism on changing their mindset. But I think it's a constant work as well. But what are the probably strategies that you could recommend to start working in that particular direction? Because not everybody is ready to change the mindset tomorrow, and you cannot do that, right? So you need to start with something.
Of course. It takes work. And that's why I'm saying every person should start where they feel they want to start, right? And talking about changing mindset, right? And self-belief and optimism, right? Are those strategies that related to mindset. What you can do here in terms of, because I'm also a very realistic person, right? I don't like this advice, like...
you just don't know how to apply it, right?
Yeah,
Change
true,
the mindset.
true,
and if you've
true.
never done that, you're like, okay, I get stuck here. What do I do with this statement?
So some of the practical ways what you can do when you are going through particular challenge and when you start feeling that, oh, that's scary, I don't think that I can do it. Remind yourself about your past experience, because regardless of how you're feeling right now, what kind of a challenge you are living through now, there are definitely some experiences of a successful change in your life. Think about it, reflect on it, and it takes effort, right? It takes effort to build new skill. The same with resilience. Spend some time, remind yourself that you have already done it. Yes, it might have been at a different scale, it might have been a different situation, but you definitely have this experience. If you reached adult age, you definitely went through a lot of challenges successfully. So remind yourself about it. Also, speaking about practical things, I want to mention another strategy that relates to mindset. It's optimism, right? And I know that especially people who are working in a business, who were trained in finance or risk management or some other areas, or scenario planning, they were trained to think about what's plan A, scenario A, B, C, and what's the worst case scenario, etc. And our brains are primed in that way. It's easy for us, and it's more important for us to think about negative case scenario. That's natural, right? What you can do, train yourself to think about what is the best case scenario. Because a lot of times when we are going through the difficult situation, we are scaring ourselves by thinking, oh my God, I'm afraid this will go wrong and then I will be destroyed, and etc., etc. And, it triggers the avalanche of different bad thoughts. Stop yourself here consciously and ask yourself, what if everything will go well? What would be possible for me? How would my life look like? And you will be surprised, actually, how unusual, unfamiliar this question is to you. I started to do this. I'm an optimistic person, but when I started to ask myself this question, I realized actually it takes me some time to come up with an answer of the best case scenario. So try it. It can be a fun game.
What prevents you from building the best case scenario?
It's nothing prevents, because I have a good imagination, to be honest. It's what I noticed when I was asking myself, like, why it's not so easy, like thinking about
absolutely
negative, right?
Same with me. It's not easy. No.
That's because this is how our brain works, right? Because for us to survive, we from the ancient ages, we were looking to look for negative signals, right? We were trained, or it was more important for us to look for this, where tiger can come out, where is the tribe can hit us. So that's how our brain works. There is nothing wrong with that, right? But if you let yourself go on autopilot, in majority of cases, your brain will go into a negative, just to support you, you to survive, right? So you need to put a conscious effort to turn yourself into optimistic thinking mode.
I think it also, for example, when I think about businesses, it also encourages businesses probably to experiment a little bit more. Because when you're thinking about the best case scenario, I mean, as much as it sounds for us adults, it sounds like, how can we think, like, we don't want to wear some pink glasses, right? And not to believe that the reality is different. But I mean, if you start training yourself to be a little bit more optimistic about the future, probably starting with yourself and then probably applying that to the business, and within some kind of, let's say, with some kind of limits, you can start imagining the best case scenario. You can basically think of a system like, let's allocate some kind of budget for an experiment. Let's see what's working with others and what feels really natural for us to experiment on, and let's just try it on. Be it a new product, be it a service, be it a marketing activity, be it a new tactic, whatever, be it a new audience, right? Just allocate some certain budget that your particular business can allow at this particular time to try new things. And I think that's what optimism does to businesses and to people.
True.
Yeah, encouraging experimental mood.
Exactly. That's what happens. That's mindset shift, right? Because optimism is not about putting pink glasses on yourself. No, it's about shifting your focus and opening yourself for new angle, new way of looking at things. And then you can start exploring opportunities, and you can take them or you cannot, right? So, but you will feel this shift into mindset, right? Going from survival mode to exploration mode, which brings us actually to next set of strategies, resilience strategies that are related to behaviors, right? And actually, challenge orientation and experimenting is one of them, and learning, right? What is you just mentioned, right? That it can bring companies to experimentation and being optimistic, and for person as well, right? Being optimistic can actually encourage person to try new things, right? Another important strategy for resilience is challenge orientation, and it's about how we actually view challenge. Do we see the challenge as a disaster, or do we see it as a learning opportunity? And those people who are seeing the challenge as a learning opportunity, actually, they tend to be more resilient, of course, because they are more willing to experiment, they're more willing to give it a try instead of being stuck and not moving anywhere. So, I believe this can be applied for organization, right? When an organization see the challenge or the problem they are facing as an opportunity rather than a threat, when they are going and asking themselves, okay, how we can learn from it? What's possible for us here? What's possible for our teams? What's possible for our people to learn? What's possible for our business to learn? Where can it take us? It completely changes your strategy, right? It moves you to another avenue of experimentation rather than protecting and keeping stuck to your routine.
Yeah. So what I think as well, when it comes to, so I want to ask you, like, let's take a specific example when it comes to, for example, personal level, and how can we convert a challenge or a problem that a person has into a positive, an opportunity, or learn something from this. Let's say like one of the most typical things that people struggle with is rejection. Be it when you're looking for a job, when you're looking for new clients, when you're just expanding your network, rejection is part of our life, right? And I know because I've faced, I personally have faced a lot of rejections in the past several years, and I know a lot of people. I met people who face rejections, and it's painful, right? It's a problem. So what that positive learning that we can take out of rejection, for example, to turn it into an opportunity or a learning experience for us?
First of all, again, because I'm a realistic person, and first, when you are dealing with something that is painful for you, something like rejection, and rejection is very painful for every person. Again, because we're social beings, right? So first of all, admit that it hurts. Admit your feelings, right? And accept them. It's something that admit that something that you're going through is actually something that upsets you, something that, hurts you. Then ask yourself a question. All right. If there is only 1 or 2% in this bad situation that can be good for me, what this 2% of good is. So ask yourself the question, and because it's bad, right? And don't try to force yourself into thinking that, oh, this is good for me. No, ask yourself, what is this 2%
that I can take, that I can take as a learning.
That you can take as a learning. And I'm sure you will notice, and if you reflect back on your experience, I'm sure you will notice that you've learned something. There is no way you are not learning, because otherwise you will not be in your profession still, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would have stopped some time ago. So there is definitely something that you've learned. So, and this would be my approach, right? I personally feel that this 2% rule is helping me to accept the learning in a very difficult situations.
Well, I call it an art of small steps. Mm-hmm. Surely it's something really small that you can take for yourself, and then you can leave the rest. Just because you've taken something out of this situation, I think you naturally would be ready to give away the rest, because you reflected on it anyway. Yeah, that's a great example. I also wanted to get a little bit back to the mindset, and I think you've mentioned learnings as well. So I think a very, very important trend, or let's say probably a personality trait, is to keep a mindset that is always ready to start again. Mm-hmm. So, and I think it very pretty much relates to resiliency a lot. I call it beginner's mindset, or beginner's mind, right? So, which actually drives experiments, drives different shifts, etc. So, how to keep that beginner's mind? And do you agree that when you build in resilience, something like a beginner's mindset is very important?
I think that beginner's mind is important for any new skill, right? Not only for resilience. And like you said, change is a new normal. It's here to stay, and I think the pace of change will be only accelerating, and the world will be becoming more complex. So we really need. Probably the most important skill that we can develop in ourselves is a skill to learn, right?
Always learn something new.
Always learn something new. Stay a lifelong learner. And for us to be able to learn something new, another important skill or step, the first step that you need to do before learning something, is to unlearn something that you already know, right?
I love it, because that was my question. Like, what do we do with all we know?
It's a good question, and I believe also this is what keeps us as a human beings very attached to our knowledge and to our old ways of doing things, because we invested time in building them. We invested time in building this knowledge and building this experience and building these skills, and they proved to be working, right? Let's admit it. They used to be effective. They helped us.
True.
And this book, What Got You Here Will Not Get You There. So this is what I believe what can help us to actually let go of our old ways of doing things. Remember, being grateful to everything that we are and we were, right? Because that explains why we're here. Still being grateful and allowing ourselves to learn new skills, to be open to change, right?
I think beginner's mind is also such a great topic because it keeps your mind totally open. It actually prevents any kind of judgment. It actually crosses so many very important, valuable topics in businesses and I think in the organizational culture as well. So I'm always trying to keep my mind at the beginning. So in all the projects that I do. And what I loved about your statement as well is we need to learn how to unlearn to be able to free up that space for the totally new chapter, for total new skill, knowledge, new people, let's say. So we need to learn how to unlearn. Great point. Yeah. So talking about strategies, so is there anything else that we want to mention on this episode to help our audiences to start thinking about resiliency?
Yeah, of course. There are a few strategies that we haven't talked about yet, still that can be very important. Even some of them that can be related to, they can help us to keep us in the beginner's mindset. There is one of the strategies that help us to be more resilient is purposeful direction. What is it about? It's about having very clear focus and having very clear purpose in life, right? And I know that a lot of people, they have very clear goals for their work or for their studies, not always for their life, right? Suggestion or tip here is think about what's your goal in life and don't think too far if it's very difficult, right? Think about the next year problem, the next couple of years. Where do you want to see yourself? How do you want your life to look at with all various elements in it, right? Why it's important for resilience? Because when we have very clear goals, when these goals are very important to us, they keep us motivated. They help us to keep going regardless of what happens, right? So when you have a clear goal, when it's very important for you, and your goal involves learning new skills, it can help you to open up yourself to new learning, right? And also it can help you to deal with the various setbacks like rejections, right? When you know that your goal is much more important than how you are feeling about this particular interaction at this moment, right? So that's another important strategy. What else? Problem-solving ability, actually. And developing our problem-solving ability is something that can help us to become more resilient. What is why it's important for resilience, and where do I start if I want to build my problem-solving ability, right?
Sure.
So it's important for resilience because it helps us to find creative solutions to complex problems. And where do you start? First, if you want to start building your problem-solving ability, start with analysis. Start with analyzing when you come across a challenge. Start with analysis. Spend some time reflecting on what the problem is, collecting information about the problem, so you can collecting probably perspectives of other people, so you can be sure that you really understand the problem at hand. That's step number one.
I think it is also a lot about identifying the actual problem, because I mean you might see a problem totally different. For example, from what it is actually. So, for example, you can't cope with the process. And the problem is not really in the process. It's probably you need to just probably understand yourself from the point of view that probably something structured is not necessarily the way it works for you or for your business. So probably a more, let's say, less measured, more creative environment works much better for you as a personality. And that's the problem is it's just your personality traits that can't work within a framework of a certain process that limits you, for example. I mean, it's also very important to identify the actual problem, I guess.
Yeah, of course. And there may be a lot of unexpected findings, actually, if you spend time analyzing the problem. Because a lot of times what happens when we come across the problem, we rush into solving it.
Exactly.
Especially those people who are very action-oriented.
Yeah.
They tend to ask themselves the question, how can we fix it? Refrain yourself from fixing it. Understand what is it that you need to fix, right? Where do you need to apply your effort?
True.
And then you will see that doing the analysis of the problem, a lot of times this analysis will give you an idea of the best way to solve it, right? So this is very important. And actually it relates to companies as well. If we are thinking about the companies and how they can become more resilient, this is what also can help understanding the problem and understanding the environment, right, before rushing into solution. So another strategy for resilience actually is adaptability. And it's about our capacity to flex our behavior, right? To flex our behavior and to adapt to a new scenario. So why it's important? I think it's obvious, right? Because if it's difficult for us to change our ways, our behaviors, if we keep fighting for things to keep the things the way they were, we will lose our energy along the way, right?
I think it's a lot about perfectionism and the standards that might not be realistic, and those standards are probably set up by some kind of social, understanding that this has to be at this level. So, and I think adaptability is a lot more about what's working for you, what's working for you and for your business. Just understand that and adapt in the way it works for you. It might actually be like there are a lot of examples that works for others, but it works for others, not for you. So I think adaptability is a lot more about being soft and be kind to yourself, be more attentive to yourself, right?
Yes, about that, and this can help you to be more adaptable, right? Understanding that focus on what's working for you and being okay with that, right? Not to follow someone else's path. And also, adaptability is about understanding if we think about what can help us to develop our adaptability, right? So, what can help us is understanding our environment, right, and understanding how it might affect us, right? And focusing on the things that we can control, right? And putting our efforts into that and letting other things be as they are, because they are out of our control, right? So this can help us be more adaptable, right?
That's right.
What else? What we have not covered yet? We have not talked about last two elements, which are related to interpersonal communication. It's support seeking and emotion regulation.
Yeah.
And why these two strategies are important for resilience, right? First, if we talk about emotion regulation, what is it? Emotion regulation. It's about our ability to stay calm under pressure, and to manage, to control our emotions, right? Why it's important? Because when we stay calm, it helps us to think clearly, right? And especially if you are the leader, emotions are contagious, right? Because we are human beings, it's contagious.
Yeah.
Especially, and we are working in a team.
Yeah.
Especially when we are a leader and when we are losing our control of our emotions, then we can disrupt our team and the process of work, right? We can affect others. So it's important to work on developing control of our emotions. What can help us? Different kinds of techniques, and a lot of people will find different ways that are working for them. For example, it can be using some kind of mindfulness techniques, or doing meditation, or practicing some breathing techniques. Anything that helps you to calm down in the moment of stress, right? And to be present in the moment. Also, for some people, yoga is working. For some people, working with a coach or therapist actually can be a good way to understand themselves better and to be in control of their emotions.
What I hear, and it can be probably applied to business as well. So don't allow yourself to be absorbed by the stressful situation. So, it's a stressful situation, or a stressful moment for the business. Take some time to get yourself back to what your values are. Think about the plan as the next step, probably, and how analyze the environment and think about the next steps. And I think that totally can be applied for the business. And I think it's been a totally valuable conversation for us, because we spoke about resilience in depth and what are the components of resilience. We spoke about things that triggered anxiety and the total change in how we do our business, interact within offices or as brands with our audiences. When we spoke about in-person communication, Zoom fatigue, and how it impacted almost every level of our lives and work. And we also spoke about some of the strategies to start building resilience, and how can we start doing it on our personal level, and how can we apply it to business as well. I think it's been an absolute value in every part that I've discussed. So I'm really thankful. And I hope this is not the last conversation for us, because I want to talk more. I think it is such a popular topic. And it's also a very useful topic. So it helps universally, regardless on a personal level or on a business level. So thank you very much for finding your time and being my guest.
Thank you, Larissa, for having me, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about one of my favorite topics.
It's great. No, it's brilliant. It's such a great topic to be in, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you.